rise to speak in this National Science Week as one of a minority of members of Parliament who have a science background. Now, I treasure my scientific training. This is the logical, rational approach to problem solving that background fostered. And I think that that background that gives me an understanding of scientific method and having a scientific approach to understanding the world and the challenges we face is a critical skill that is undervalued in this place, and a critical skill that needs to be brought to our decision-making in this place. Sadly, since my days as a science student at university, when I studied maths and meteorology, I've seen respect for science fly out the window. And the last few years have marked a low point in support for science by government. However, support for science by the public continues to grow. People recognise that if we're going to face the challenges of the 21st century, we need the skills to think and reason through science and scientific method. Australia has a long history of scientific achievement, from early refrigerators to solar hot water to ultrasound technology, the bionic ear, the world's first frozen embryo baby, the famous winged keel of Australia 2, the Wi-Fi that we all use, and even the dual flush toilet. Australia has led the world. But this government, led by Prime Minister Abbott, is doing its best to gut our science industry and to trash our international reputation while they're at it. And unfortunately, the rosy approach to science that Senator McGrath has just outlined in his contribution is far from the reality that we see on the ground. On top of cuts from the previous Labor government, last year's brutal budget slashed spending on research and development, and the cuts were continued this year, with research and development funding now at the lowest level for 30 years. And morale amongst the scientists that I know is also at an all-time low. I think of one of the people that I know that I've been communicating with on social media who's just finished a PhD in marine biology. And his desperate plea to me was, I don't want to have to leave Australia. He wants to stay here, he wants to contribute to the Australian scientific effort, but he can see the potential for jobs for him, despite the fact that there is a huge amount of research that needs to be undertaken that is critical for Australia's future. He just doesn't see that the jobs are going to be there, and can see that if he wants to continue to work in his field, to use his skills as a scientist, he's going to have to go overseas. In the Treasurer's budget night speech, not once was the word science used. Not once. We have to turn the corner and see that investment in science and research is vital for our well-being and the economy. When the mining boom is over, we'll need something to sell to the rest of the world. The Greens want to see scientific pursuits like renewable energy research and medical research get the same kind of multi-billion-dollar support currently given to fossil fuel companies. But instead of encouraging science, this government just wants to deny it. And the lack of scientific literacy, the lack of value that this government places on science is alarming. The science tells us that we have to act to combat climate change, and we have to act now. We have to act seriously. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is an incredible international institution bringing together thousands of scientists to reach consensus agreements on the science of climate change, and research undertaken by IPCC scientists around the world, including in Australia by CSIRO and the Bureau of Meteorology. It's informed the position taken by the Climate Change Authority, which has said, based on the science, that we need to cut emissions by 40 to 60% by 2030 to protect our community from the devastating impacts of global warming on our health, the health of our environment and the health of our economy. Yet we have a Prime Minister who dismisses the science as absolute crap. The science tells us that we have to make the shift from fossil fuels to clean energy like wind and solar, and we have to do it extremely quickly. Yet we have a Prime Minister who insists that coal is good for humanity and brags about reducing the renewable energy target. The science tells us that there's no credible evidence about the negative impacts of wind farms. The science actually shows that these false claims can make people sick. Yet we have a Prime Minister who continues to perpetuate myths about the impacts of wind farms. It's time for the Prime Minister and his government to start listening to the science and the community, instead of providing an unfiltered ear to the big polluters, their slick lobbyists and the mega political donations. The science does not tell us that burning native forests for energy is in any way renewable, that creating massive new coal mines has no impact on the climate, or that culling sharks has any benefit to swimmers' safety, but the government does not want to listen. It was recently made public that the Environment Minister had a report sitting on his desk from eminent scientists Andrew McIntosh and Professor David Lindenmayer, showing that ending logging in Victoria's Central Highlands would have a carbon abatement of 3 million tonnes every year, which, based on the price that the government paid earlier this year of $14 a tonne for carbon, would be worth more than $40 million every year. The science tells us that ending native forest logging throughout the country would be worth billions of dollars in carbon abatement. It would reduce the effects of climate change, boost local jobs in tourism and save some of our most endangered and precious animals. Science is waving its arms in the air with the answers to our future prosperity. It's shouting about the industries of the future that are in research and development, in manufacturing clean energy products like electric cars and solar panels, and ensuring that the coming generations receive a world-class, scientifically based education. But this government simply refuses to listen. This government's attitude to science highlights that they have no plan or vision for the future. Mr. Acting Deputy President, in this National Science Week, we must open our ears and let science be the hero.